The scream sliced through the autumn morning like a blade, sharp and desperate, pulling Ethan Caldwell from his routine. He froze mid-step on the creaking porch of his family's farmhouse, coffee mug steaming in his calloused hands, the crisp October air biting at his knuckles. His old border collie, Rusty, pricked his ears, his graying muzzle twitching toward the woods that fringed the property. Ethan's heart thudded, not from fear, but from instinct honed by years of listening to the land. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. "Stay, boy," he murmured, setting the mug on the porch rail. Rusty whined but obeyed, his loyal eyes tracking Ethan as he grabbed his father's worn leather jacket and headed toward the sound. The woods were dense, their leaves a riot of red and gold. But the cry came again, weaker now, guiding him through the underbrush. His boots crunched over fallen twigs, each step heavier with the weight of responsibility. This was his land, passed down through 3 generations of Caldwells, and whatever trouble had found it was his to face. In a small clearing, he stopped cold. A woman lay sprawled on the ground, her leg clamped in the rusted jaws of an illegal hunter's trap. Blood stained the leaves around her, and her face was pale, her dark hair matted with sweat. She was no local, her hiking gear was too expensive, her features too refined, but her eyes, wide with pain and defiance, locked onto his. Ethan's stomach churned at the sight of the trap's cruel teeth, banned decades ago but still viciously effective. "Hold still," he said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through him. "I'm here to help." "Stay back," she snapped, her voice trembling but fierce. "I can handle this." She tried to push herself up, only to collapse with a stifled gasp. Ethan crouched beside her, ignoring her protest. Her fear was palpable, but so was her strength, like a cornered animal refusing to yield. "That trap could have killed you," he said, keeping his tone calm, the way he'd soothe a spooked horse. "Let me get you out, then we'll figure out what's next." Her eyes searched his, wary but desperate. After a long moment, she nodded. Ethan's hands moved with practiced care, his muscles straining as he pried the trap open. The metal screeched, and she bit back a scream, her fingers digging into the dirt. Free at last, her leg bled freely, but Ethan saw with relief that no major arteries were hit. "Can you stand?" he asked. She tried, only to crumple. "Mehiwano chindum onesher maimuna." Without a word, he scooped her into his arms, her weight light but trembling. She didn't resist, though her breath hitched, her head resting against his shoulder as he carried her back through the woods. Rusty limping ahead to clear the path. "I'm Ethan Caldwell," he said, his voice low, grounding. "My farm's just ahead." She was silent for a beat, then whispered, "Asin inaman unhananaunitawantum." "Clara Thornton. No last name, just a name that felt like a guarded secret." Her voice carried a hint of an accent, not quite city, but polished, like someone who'd spent years in boardrooms or ballrooms. Ethan didn't press. People had their reasons for silence, and he knew that better than most. The farmhouse came into view, unfortunately, its white paint peeling, but its windows warm with morning light. Clara's grip tightened on his jacket, her breath shallow. "It's not much," Ethan said, suddenly aware of the sagging porch steps, the weathered boards. "But it's home." Her voice was barely audible. "It's perfect." The words carried a longing that made Ethan pause, wondering what kind of life she was running from to find solace in a stranger's rundown farm. Inside, he settled her on the living room sofa, his mother's quilt soft under her trembling frame. Rusty curled up nearby, his soft whines echoing Ethan's own concern. Clara's face was pale, her eyes darting around the room, taking in the faded family photos, the ticking grandfather clock, the simple life Ethan had fought to preserve. "I need my first aid kit," he said, moving quickly to the kitchen. The kit, a wooden box with brass fittings, held a mix of modern supplies and his mother's herbal remedies, a testament to generations of self-reliance. "This'll sting," he warned, kneeling beside her with antiseptic. Clara nodded, her jaw clenched as he cleaned the wound. Her fingers gripped the quilt, but she didn't cry out, her silence a kind of stubborn pride. Ethan worked fast, his hands steady from years of patching up livestock and mending fences. The wounds were deep but clean, a small mercy. "You've done this before, Fernie," she observed, her voice tight but curious. "Farm life teaches you to fix what's broken," he said, applying bandages with care. "Usually it's cows or tractors." "Not," he hesitated, meeting her gaze. Not people who wander into traps on my land. A faint smile flickered across her face, quickly replaced by a grimace. I owe you an explanation, she said. You don't owe me anything, Ethan replied, securing the bandage. Except maybe letting me call a doctor. Her eyes flashed with panic. No doctors. No authorities. Please. Give me the one. Please. The plea caught him off guard, but Ethan nodded. He'd learned long ago that trust was earned, not demanded. All right, winner's renovation, but you need rest. You can take my room, it's on this floor. I'll sleep upstairs. I can't, she started, but Ethan cut her off, his tone gentle but firm. You can put in this, and you will, unless you're planning to walk out on that leg. Clara's shoulders slumped, the fight draining from her. Why are you helping me? Oh, she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan thought of his mother, who'd taken in strays, human and animal alike, with no questions asked. He thought of his late wife, Emily, whose kindness had been the heartbeat of this farm. Because you need it, he said simply. And because that's what we do here. Something softened in Clara's expression, a crack in her guarded facade. Thank you, she whispered, and Ethan felt the weight of those words, as if she rarely spoke them. As he made up the bed, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a chance encounter. Clara was running from something or someone, and her presence in his quiet life was like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples he couldn't yet predict. Outside, the wind rattled the windows, and Rusty whined softly, sensing the storm that was coming, whether Ethan was ready for it or not. By late afternoon, Clara had fallen into an exhausted sleep, her face finally relaxed. Ethan moved quietly through the house, tackling chores while keeping an eye on her. The farm's demands never stopped. Fences to mend, chickens to feed, bills to dodge, but today, they felt secondary. He was gathering Clara's torn clothes to wash when a sleek phone slipped from her jacket pocket. Its screen cracked but flickering to life. Through the shattered glass, an image appeared. Unrecognizable in a glittering gown, standing beside a stern-faced man in front of a Manhattan skyscraper. The caption was faint but clear. Clara Thornton, heir to Thornton Enterprises. At annual gala, Ethan's breath caught. Clara Thornton, the billionaire heiress who'd vanished 3 years ago, leaving behind a corporate empire and endless speculation. He stared at the phone, his mind racing. The woman on his sofa wasn't just a stranger. She was a fugitive, hunted by forces far beyond his small-town world. I was wondering when you'd figure it out. Clara's voice cut through his thoughts. She stood in the doorway, leaning heavily on the frame, her injured leg barely touching the ground. Her eyes were wary, but there was no apology in them. Only resolve. You shouldn't be up, Ethan said, setting the phone down. Were you ever going to tell me? Clara's lips tightened. Would it have changed how you helped me? He admitted. But it might explain why someone set that trap on my land. Her face paled, her fingers gripping the doorframe. What do you mean? That trap wasn't some old relic, Ethan said, his voice low. It was new, maintained. Someone placed it there on purpose. Clara sank onto the sofa, her composure cracking. They found me, she whispered. I thought I was careful, but they found me. Who? Ethan pulled a chair closer, the old wood creaking under his weight. Clara's fingers twisted in the quilt, her voice heavy with secrets. Everyone, my father's board of directors, the corporate sharks waiting for me to fail, the press the people I've been hiding from for 3 years. She took a shaky breath, then began. 3 years ago, I was set to become CEO of Thornton Enterprises. It's what I was raised for. Every choice, every relationship, shaped to make me the perfect leader. But the night before my appointment, I found evidence of corruption, toxic dumping in rural communities, bribed inspectors, falsified reports, entire towns poisoned for profit. When I confronted the board, they told me to stay quiet, that it would be handled. So I ran, took every document I could, set up a dead man switch on that phone. If anything happens to me, the truth goes public. Ethan leaned forward, his farmer's pragmatism warring with disbelief. And now they're hunting you. They can't kill me, Clara said, her voice grim. That would trigger the release. But if they can prove I'm unstable, lock me away, she trailed off, her eyes distant. Ethan thought of the trap, its cruel precision, and anger flared in his chest. "You're not going anywhere on that leg," he said firmly. "And you're not facing this alone." Clara stared at him, something like wonder in her eyes. "You believe me?" "Just like that. I've spent my life reading the land." Ethan said, "You learn to trust your instincts, and mine say you're telling the truth." A small smile broke through her fear, and for a moment, she looked younger, less burdened. Ethan stood, his decision made. "I'll bring you dinner. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." As he moved to the kitchen, Clara's soft "thank you" followed him, and Ethan felt his heart stutter. He didn't know what he was getting into, but for the first time since Emily's death, he felt alive, like the farm wasn't just a legacy to preserve, but a battleground worth fighting for. A week later, the rhythm of farm life had shifted to include Clara. Her leg was healing, the bandages clean and white. Though she still limped, she'd taken to sitting on the porch, poring over Ethan's mother's garden journal, a leather-bound book filled with notes on plants and remedies. Ethan found her there one morning, her fingers tracing his mother's handwriting, her face alight with curiosity. "Your mother was brilliant," Clara said, not looking up. She was using sustainable methods decades before they were trendy. Ethan set a coffee mug beside her, black and strong, the way she liked it. She believed in working with the land, not against it. Said the old ways had wisdom. Clara closed the journal, her expression wistful. "I feel useless, sitting here while you work all day." Ethan studied her, noting the frustration in her tight shoulders. "Think you can handle the porch for a bit longer?" Her eyes brightened, eager for purpose. "Try and stop me." He helped her settle into the old rocker, the vegetable garden sprawling before them. "Here," he said, placing a basket of dried beans beside her. "These need shelling for next year's seeds. Think a city girl can manage." Clara picked up a pod, her manicured nails awkward but determined. "Show me." Ethan demonstrated, his rough fingers splitting the pod with ease. Clara watched, then tried her first attempt scattering beans across her lap. "Sorry," she muttered, cheeks flushing. "You're learning." Ethan said, his voice warm. "Everyone starts somewhere." They worked in silence, the crack of shells and the plink of beans a quiet symphony. Rusty dozed at Clara's feet, his presence a comfort. "I used to think I was accomplished," Clara said after a while, her movements growing surer. "I could negotiate deals worth millions, speak 3 languages, outsmart boardroom rivals. But this," she held up a shelled pod, "this is real. I can see the result of my work." Ethan watched her, noting the peace in her face, the way the morning light softened her edges. "It's real enough," he said. "Though I bet running an empire isn't exactly easy." She laughed, the sound bright and unguarded. "No, but it was all numbers and signatures. Nothing I could touch. Nothing that mattered." Ethan's chest warmed at her words, at the way she seemed to fit here, against all odds. "The garden needs winter prep," he said, surprising himself. "If you're up for more hands-on work, won't I slow you down?" she asked, hesitant. Ethan smiled. "Sometimes slower's better. Mom always said a garden grows best when you know it." Over the next few days, they fell into a routine. Clara learned to read soil, to save seeds, to spot a plant's health by its leaves. The journal became her guide, her notes mingling with his mother's. Ethan watched her transform, her corporate polish giving way to a quiet confidence, her hands growing deft in the dirt. One afternoon, she held up the journal triumphantly. "Your tomatoes need calcium. Your mom fixed the same problem in '87 with eggshells." Ethan grinned, driving to town for supplies, his heart full as he watched her measure out the remedy with care. That evening, on the porch, "Is Siriconar?" Clara said. "I haven't thought about the board all day." Her voice was soft, her eyes peaceful. "Too busy living," Ethan replied, and when their gazes met, something unspoken passed between them. A possibility, fragile but growing. The business magazine arrived with the mail, its headline screaming, "Thornton Harris missing. Global search intensifies. A photo showed Clara from 3 years ago, polished and untouchable, a world away from the woman shelling beans on his porch. Ethan's stomach tightened as he read, "A $10 million reward? Hurry." Private investigators, and quotes from Thornton's board, dripping with concern. "They're desperate," Clara said from the doorway, her cane a branch Ethan had carved steadying her. She'd grown stronger, her limp fading. "You've seen this?" Ethan asked, handing her the magazine. No! But I expected it. She flipped through it, her face hard. The shareholders' meeting is in 3 weeks. They need me or proof I'm unfit before then? Ethan pointed to a quote from her father. Edward Thornton. He says he misses you. Clara's laugh was bitter. He misses his puppet. I was never Clara to him, just the Thornton heir. Ethan thought of his own legacy, the farm's weight on his shoulders. Couldn't you have fought from within? He asked. I tried, she said, her voice raw. For months. I went through every channel, agencies, regulators, our own compliance team. But Thornton's influence is too deep. Every whistleblower was silenced. Every report buried. She gestured to the phone. That's why I ran. Everything's on there, encrypted. Ready to go public if they get me. Ethan paced, anger simmering. And now they're here, setting traps. Clara nodded. I thought I was safe in this nowhere town. I should leave before I bring trouble to you. Ethan stopped, his voice firm. Trouble's already here. Better to face it together. Clara's eyes softened, a flicker of hope breaking through her fear. You're not what I expected, she said. Ethan grinned faintly. Good. Now let's figure out how to keep you safe. A week later, the threats began. Letters arrived at the farm, their corporate letterhead eerily authentic, warning Clara to return or face consequences. Ethan found her poring over them one morning, her face grim. They're not from my father, she said, pointing to a watermark. I designed the real letterhead. This one's a fake. Someone's trying to scare me off. Ethan leaned closer, his jaw tight. Who he is? Clara's eyes darkened. Nathan Carver. My ex-fiancé. He runs Carver Solutions, Thornton's waste management partner. If my evidence goes public, his company collapses. Ethan's mind flashed to the trap. It's deliberate placement. He knew where to find you. Clara nodded, flipping through her journal. When he visited last week, he mentioned details about the trap. Things only the person who said it would know. Ethan's anger flared, but before he could speak, his neighbor, Mike Larson, burst in, holding a tablet. They're making their move. He determined us, he said, showing a news article. Thornton Heiress unstable. Sources claim paranoid delusions. Clara read it, her face hardening. Nathan's quoted everywhere, painting me as a lunatic. They've filed for an emergency competency hearing tomorrow. Ethan's stomach dropped. To lock you away before the shareholders' meeting? Clara moved to the window, her voice steady. We have everything we need, the fake letters. Nathan's slip, the evidence. It's time to fight. How? Mike asked. Clara's smile was fierce. I'm done hiding. I'm calling the press. She dialed a number. Her voice commanding. This is Clara Thornton. I want a live interview. Tomorrow morning. From Caldwell Farm. I'm telling the world why Carver Solutions tried to silence me. Ethan felt pride and fear collide in his chest. They'll come for you, he warned. Clara's eyes met his, unwavering. Let them. I'm ready. The next morning, the farm was a fortress of activity. News vans lined the driveway, and the national morning show set up in the barn. Clara stood before the mirror, wearing jeans and a crisp shirt, a blend of her worlds. Ethan took her hand, his heart pounding. Together, he asked. Together, she replied, squeezing back. Outside, Edward Thornton and Nathan Carver arrived with the board, their faces a mask of concern for the cameras. Clara, where's his sermon? Darling, Edward called, his voice dripping with false warmth. Thank God we found you. Clara stepped forward, her voice cutting through the morning air. No more secrets. Friederi, Rieri, on a further one on honor. No more threats. The cameras rolled as she spoke, her voice steady. 3 years ago, I discovered Carver Solutions and Thornton Enterprises hid toxic dumping across multiple states. I have proof, documents, emails, witness statements. She held up a flash drive, then produced the fake letters, and proof that Nathan Carver tried to discredit me with these forgeries, even setting a trap to injure me. Nathan surged forward, but the cameras caught his panic. You can't, he started, but Clara cut him off. I can, and I will. She opened a proposal, her voice rising. Thornton Enterprises can lead in environmental restoration, starting here at Caldwell Farm, a pilot program for sustainable farming, healing the land we poison. The anchor, Lisa Hazen as Herma Shawweeds, leaned forward. You're proposing a corporate revolution. Clara's eyes blazed. Starting today. Edward Thornton's face flickered with calculation, then resolve. Illuminati My daughter's right, he said. Turning to the cameras, Thornton Enterprises announces a new initiative. Beginning with Caldwell Farm, Nathan's posture slumped. Defeat clear. Clara leaned back, Ethan's hand finding hers. A silent vow. Months later, the farm was transformed. The Caldwell Thornton Foundation stood proud. Its fields a testing ground for sustainable crops. Its classrooms teaching farmers and executives alike. Clara split her time between the farm and New York, her mission thriving. One evening, on their porch swing, she touched her belly, a secret smile on her lips. "Good day," Ethan asked, pulling her close. "Sir, we're Diranantinovo. The best. Tiretonasurantusun," she said, her voice soft. "The land's healing. Like us?" As the sun set, Ethan thought of the morning he'd found her, broken but unbroken, and knew that from that wound had grown a legacy neither could have imagined. A harvest of truth, love, and hope. The autumn evening wrapped around the Caldwell Thornton farm like a warm blanket, the air heavy with the scent of ripe apples and freshly turned earth. Ethan and Clara sat on their porch swing, the gentle creak of its chains blending with the distant hum of crickets. The farm had grown in ways Ethan never dreamed, a patchwork of test fields, research barns, and teaching gardens that drew visitors from across the country. But tonight, it was just them. The world quiet except for the soft glow of fireflies and the weight of Clara's hand in his. Ethan's fingers traced the simple band of her wedding ring, a reminder of the day they'd stood in the garden, surrounded by neighbors and corporate giants, and promised to build something new. That day, 6 months ago, had been a blur of wildflowers, homemade pies, irreverent and laughter that echoed into the night. Clara's dress, a simple lace affair, had shocked her old Manhattan crowd, but to Ethan, she'd never looked more herself, radiant, grounded. Free, as she leaned into his side, her breath steady, he felt the same quiet joy that had carried them through that day. "You're quiet tonight," Clara said, her voice soft but teasing. She tilted her head to look at him, her dark eyes catching the last light of the sunset. "Plotting new ways to make me shell beans properly." Ethan chuckled, the sound low and warm. "You're getting better. Only dropped half the basket last time." She swatted his arm playfully, but her smile faded slightly, a flicker of something deeper crossing her face. Ethan knew that look. Her mind was turning over something heavy, something she hadn't yet shared. "What is it?" he asked, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. Clara hesitated, then reached into her pocket, pulling out a folded letter. The paper was thick, embossed with the Thornton Enterprises crest, but its edges were worn, as if she'd held it too long. "This came today," she said, her voice steady but laced with unease. "From my father. He's stepping down as chairman. Wants me to take his place." Ethan's chest tightened, a mix of pride and dread. He'd seen Clara's strength, the way she'd turned Thornton's board from adversaries to allies, forcing them to embrace her vision of environmental restoration. But the idea of her stepping into the heart of that corporate machine, so far from the farm, stirred a fear he hadn't felt since the day Nathan Carver's convoy rolled up their driveway. "What do you want?" he asked, keeping his voice even. Clara unfolded the letter, her eyes scanning the words as if searching for an answer. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice raw. "Part of me wants to say no, wants to stay here, keep building what we've started. The warn, the circuit number, the farm, the foundation, it's real. Ethan, it's home." She paused, her fingers tightening on the paper. "But another part knows I could do more from the top. Push for bigger changes, protect more communities, hold other corporations accountable. It's what I ran from 3 years ago. But now," she trailed off, her gaze drifting to the fields where their first heritage grain crops swayed in the breeze. Ethan followed her gaze, his heart heavy. The farm was his legacy, tied to his grandfather's sacrifice, his father's toil, Emily's dreams. But it was Clara's legacy too. Now, her hands had worked this soil. Her vision had given it new purpose. The thought of her leaving, even for a greater good, felt like losing a piece of himself. Yet he knew her strength, her fire, Onmarimon. "You'd be unstoppable," he said quietly. "But it's a hell of a fight. And you wouldn't be here." Clara turned to him, her eyes searching his face. "Would you come with me?" The question hung between them, fragile as morning dew. Ethan's breath caught. New York was a world he'd never known. Skyscrapers instead of silos. Boardrooms instead of barns. He thought of Rusty, slowing with age, who'd never survive a city kennel. He thought of the farm, its rhythms as vital to him as his own heartbeat. But then he looked at Clara, her face open. Trun, vulnerable, and knew he'd follow her anywhere if it meant keeping her close. "I'd try," he said honestly, "but I'm not sure I'd fit in your world." Clara's smile was small but warm, her hand squeezing his. "You fit in mine," she said, "and I'm not sure I want that world without you." They sat in silence, the swing swaying gently. As the weight of her choice settled around them, Ethan knew this wasn't a decision for tonight. But the letter was a reminder that their quiet life was still tethered to a larger battle, one Clara might never fully escape. The next morning, the farm buzzed with its usual rhythm. A group of local school kids darted through the teaching garden, their laughter mingling with Mrs. Mir Larson's patient instructions on pollinators. In the research barn, corporate trainees from Thornton's sustainability program scribbled notes as Ethan demonstrated soil testing, his voice steady despite the sleepless night. Clara moved among them, her cane long gone, her presence commanding yet approachable. She'd become a bridge between worlds, translating Ethan's practical wisdom into corporate strategy, and the trainees hung on her every word. Ethan watched her from across the barn, his heart swelling with pride. She'd changed since that first morning in the woods. Her guarded edges softened, her purpose clarified, but the letter in her pocket was a shadow, a reminder that their time here might be borrowed. As the session ended, Clara joined him, her face flushed with the morning's work. "They're learning," she said, nodding toward the trainees. "One of them asked if we could scale your composting method globally." Ethan grinned, wiping sweat from his brow. "Tell him to start small. Nature doesn't like shortcuts." Clara laughed, the sound easing the tension in his chest. But before he could say more, Mike Larson appeared, his face grim. "Ethan, I'm not Clara one. You was from Western. You need to see this." He held out his phone, a news alert glowing on the screen. Thornton Enterprises faces new allegations of cover-up in Midwest dumping scandal. Clara's face hardened as she read, her fingers tightening around the phone. "This isn't us," she said, her voice low. "These are old sites, from before I exposed Nathan's operation. Someone's digging up the past to discredit our work now." Ethan's jaw clenched. "Maybe," Clara said, her eyes narrowing. "Or someone else who wants Thornton to fail. The timing's too convenient." Right before the chairman vote, she handed the phone back to Mike, her posture shifting from teacher to warrior. "I need to make some calls. If this is a setup, I'll find out who's behind it." Ethan followed her to the farmhouse, his mind racing. The allegations were a direct attack on Clara's credibility, a way to undermine her before she could even consider her father's offer. Inside, Clara paced the kitchen, her phone pressed to her ear as she spoke to her legal team in New York. Ethan busied himself with coffee, giving her space. But his thoughts churned. The farm was thriving, but it was also a target. Clara's presence had made it a symbol, and symbols attracted enemies. By afternoon, Clara had answers. She sat at the kitchen table, her journal open, notes scrawled in her precise handwriting. "It's not Nathan," she said, her voice tight. "He's been too busy salvaging his own company to orchestrate this. But one of Thornton's old board members, Richard Hale, has been meeting with rival firms. He's the one leaking these stories, framing them as new to tank our stock before the vote." Ethan leaned against the counter, his arms crossed. "Why?" "Power, West service," Clara said simply. "Hale was loyal to my father's old ways. He hates what I've done, opening the company to scrutiny. Partnering with farmers like you, if he can discredit me, he can push his own candidate for chairman, someone who'll roll back our reforms." She tapped her pen against the journal, her eyes blazing. "He's betting I won't fight back from here." Ethan felt a surge of protectiveness, mixed with admiration. "So, what's the plan?" Clara's smile was fierce, the same smile that had faced down Nathan and her father on live TV. "We go public, again. But this time, we don't just defend ourselves. We show the world what we're building here. Hale wants to play dirty. I'll bury him in truth." Over the next week, the farm became a war room. Clara coordinated with Thornton's PR team, scheduling a press conference to coincide with the chairman vote. Ethan rallied the community, inviting local farmers, school kids, and even the church choir to showcase the foundation's work. The teaching garden bloomed with late-season flowers. The research fields glowed with healthy crops, and the barn was polished to a shine. Clara worked tirelessly, her energy infectious. But Ethan saw the strain in her eyes, the weight of her dual worlds. The night before the press conference, they sat on the porch swing, the air cool and sharp. Clara held the letter from her father, its words memorized but still heavy. "If I take the chairmanship," she said, her voice low, "it's a chance to fix things on a scale I never imagined. But it means leaving us, for months at a time." She looked at Ethan, her eyes searching. "I don't want to lose what we've built." Ethan took her hand, his thumb tracing her ring. "You won't lose me," he said, his voice steady. "This farm, this life, it's ours. No matter where you are, you fight your war. Clara, I'll keep the home fires burning." Her eyes glistened, and she leaned into him, her breath warm against his neck. "I don't deserve you," she whispered. "You deserve everything," Ethan said, kissing her forehead. "And you're gonna get it." They sat there, he can discern, wrapped in each other, as the stars emerged. A quiet promise that whatever came next, they'd face it together. The press conference was a triumph. The barn, transformed into a stage, glowed with fairy lights and fresh hay bales. Clara stood at the podium, her voice clear and commanding. As she debunked Hale's allegations with forensic precision, she held up soil samples from their restoration sites, clean and thriving, and introduced farmers whose livelihoods had been saved by the foundation's work. Ethan stood beside her, his presence steady, as school kids presented their butterfly projects and the choir sang a hymn of renewal. The cameras rolled, capturing every moment, and when Clara announced her candidacy for chairman, the crowd erupted. Edward Thornton, watching from the front row, nodded once, his face a mix of pride and resignation. Hale's scheme collapsed under the weight of Clara's evidence, his allies abandoning him as Thornton's stock soared. By nightfall, Clara was the presumptive chairman, her vision for a greener, fairer future cemented. But the victory was bittersweet. As the news vans departed, Clara and Ethan stood in the garden, the moonlight silvering the crops. "I have to go to New York," she said, her voice heavy. "Just for a few months, to set things in motion." Ethan nodded, his heart aching but resolute. "I'll be here," he said, "and I'll come visit. Rusty might even like a city park." Clara laughed, tears in her eyes, and pulled him close. "I'm coming back," she promised. "This is home." They kissed, slow and deep, the garden whispering around them, a testament to the roots they'd planted together. 3 months later, Clara returned, her chairmanship secured, her reforms underway. The farm welcomed her with open arms, Rusty barking, the community gathering, the fields greener than ever. She and Ethan stood on the porch, her hand resting on her belly, their secret no longer just theirs. "A new Caldwell," she said, her smile radiant. "Or Thornton, we'll figure it out." Ethan pulled her close, the swing swaying beneath them. "We always do," he said, and as the sun set over their merged worlds, he knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they'd face them as they always had, side by side. Growing love in unlikely soil. Spring arrived at the Caldwell Thornton farm with a burst of green, the fields waking from their winter slumber under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Ethan stood at the edge of the north pasture, his boots sinking into the soft earth, watching a group of new interns plant rows of drought-resistant sorghum. The air smelled of fresh soil and promise, but his thoughts were elsewhere, tethered to Clara, who'd been in New York for 3 months now, steering Thornton Enterprises through its transformation. Her absence was a quiet ache, like a missing limb, though her daily calls and the occasional weekend visit kept the distance bearable. Rusty limped over, his tail wagging despite his arthritic joints, and nudged Ethan's hand. "Miss her too." Ethan murmured, scratching the old dog's ears. He glanced at the farmhouse, its new coat of paint gleaming in the morning light, a symbol of the farm's rebirth. The foundation had grown beyond his wildest dreams. Research grants poured in, schools booked tours months in advance, and farmers from neighboring states came to learn sustainable techniques. But without Clara's laughter echoing on the porch, it felt incomplete. Inside, the kitchen table was buried under blueprints for a new community center, a project Clara had championed before leaving. Ethan traced the plans with a calloused finger, picturing the space where kids would learn, farmers would meet, and the town would gather. It was her vision, but his hands would build it, a promise to keep their shared dream alive. The phone buzzed in his pocket, and his heart lifted at Clara's name on the screen. Hey, wait a one, stranger. He said, his voice warm despite the early hour. Miss me? Clara's voice crackled through, teasing but tired. Ethan could hear the hum of the city in the background. Horns, voices, a sarpiti, the relentless pulse of Manhattan. Every damn day, he admitted, leaning against the counter. How's the corporate jungle? Exhausting. Rain, she said, a sigh slipping through. The board's finally on board with the full restructuring. But it's like herding cats. Hale's gone quiet, but I don't trust it. He's got too many friends in high places. Ethan's jaw tightened at the mention of Richard Hale, the board member who tried to sabotage Clara's reforms. And you? She asked. How's our farm growing? Ethan said, glancing out the window at the interns. The sorghum's looking good, and Mrs. Sewell Larson's got the kids planting a butterfly garden. But it's not the same without you. The words hung heavy, and he heard Clara's breath catch. I'm coming home soon, she said softly. 2 weeks. Tops. Cotton. I just need to finalize the new sustainability fund. Then I'm yours. Ethan's chest warmed at the word home, but before he could reply, she added, and Ethan, in one, Armanas Rainorna. Check the mail. I sent you something. Cryptic. He teased, but her laugh was bright, easing the ache in his heart. They talked a few minutes more about the farm, Sorrow, the city, the baby they'd soon welcome. When the call ended, Ethan felt lighter. The day's work suddenly more manageable. The mailbox at the end of the drive held a small package. Its return address, a Thornton Enterprises office. Inside was a leather-bound journal, its cover embossed with the Caldwell Thornton Farm logo, a tree rooted in rich soil, its branches reaching skyward. A note in Clara's neat handwriting read, for our next chapter, write it with me. Ethan's throat tightened as he flipped through the blank pages, imagining the stories they'd fill it with. Crops and kids, triumphs and struggles, a life built together. He tucked the journal under his arm and headed back to the fields. But a glint of metal on the ridge road caught his eye. A black SUV idled there, its tinted windows gleaming like a predator's eyes. Ethan's gut twisted. He'd seen cars like that before, during the worst of Clara's battle with the board. Haley, or someone like him, was watching. He pulled out his phone, snapping a photo of the license plate, and sent it to Mike Larson with a quick message. Keep an eye out. Trouble's back. Mike arrived within the hour, his pickup kicking up dust as he pulled into the drive. Same plates as last week, he said. Climbing out, his face grim. Saw it near the co-op. Just sitting there. You think it's Hale's people? Has to be, Ethan said, his voice low. Clara said he's been too quiet, probably waiting for her to slip up. He glanced at the farmhouse, its warmth a stark contrast to the cold threat on the ridge. We need to warn her. Mike nodded, pulling out his phone. I'll get the word out. Town's got your back. Ethan. Always will. Ethan clapped his friend's shoulder, gratitude mixing with resolve. The community had saved the farm once, rallying to pay off the bank when foreclosure loomed. Now, in Famiuam, they'd stand with him again. A wall of small-town loyalty against corporate schemes. That evening, Ethan called Clara, his voice steady as he relayed the SUV sighting. Her silence was heavy. Then she said, Hale's playing his last card. I found out today he's been funneling money to a shell company, trying to buy votes for the next board election. If he gets control, he'll gut everything we've built. Ethan heard the steel in her voice, the same fire that had faced down her father and Nathan Carver. I'm not letting him win, she added. I'm coming home tomorrow. We'll fight this together. Ethan's heart leapt, but worry gnawed at him. It's not safe. Clara, not with Hale's goons sniffing around. I'm done hiding, she said, her voice fierce. This is our home. Our legacy. I'm not letting him take it. Ethan couldn't argue with that. He spent the night preparing, checking fences, securing the barn, and briefing the farm staff. The community rallied, with Mrs. Larson organizing a watch schedule and Mike spreading the word at the diner. By dawn, the farm was a fortress, Its fields peaceful, but its people ready. Clara's plane landed at noon, and Ethan was there to meet her, his truck idling at the small county airport. She stepped off the tarmac, her hair loose, her eyes tired but bright. She wore jeans and a flannel shirt, a far cry from the corporate suits of her New York life. And when she saw Ethan, her face lit up. He pulled her into his arms, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo, the faint city smog clinging to her clothes. "You're here," he said, his voice rough with relief. "Told you I'd come back," she murmured, her arms tight around him. They stood there, the world fading, until she pulled back, her hand resting on her belly. "We're okay," she said, answering his unspoken question. "But we've got work to do." The drive home was quiet, Clara's hand in Ethan's as she outlined her plan. "Hale's shell company is sloppy," she said, her voice sharp. "I've got forensic accountants tracing every transaction. By tomorrow, I'll have enough to expose him at the board meeting. But he'll try to stop me first." Ethan nodded, his eyes on the road. The SUV nowhere in sight but its shadow lingering. At the farm, the community greeted Clara like family. Mrs. Larson pressed a basket of cookies into her hands. Mike offered a gruff welcome back, and the interns swarmed her with questions about the New York office. Clara moved among them with ease, her corporate Polish softened by the farm's warmth. But Ethan saw the tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes flicked to the horizon, searching for threats. That night, they sat in the kitchen, the new journal open between them. Clara sketched out her strategy, her pen flying as she listed names, dates, and and transactions. Ethan added his own notes, local contacts, community resources, ways to protect the farm if Hale's people came calling. Rusty lay at their feet, his presence a quiet anchor, though his breathing was slower now, his age catching up. At midnight, a knock startled them. Mike stood on the porch, his face pale. "They're here," he said, pointing to the ridge, and three SUVs now, their engines idling, headlights cutting through the dark. Ethan's blood ran cold, but Clara's face was calm, her hand steady as she picked up her phone. "Call the sheriff," she told Mike, "and get the press. If Hale wants a fight, he's getting one." The next morning, the farm was a hive of activity. Sheriff Daniels arrived with 2 deputies, their cruisers parked prominently at the gate. News vans followed, drawn by Clara's late-night call to Lisa Hayes, the anchor who'd broadcast her first stand against Thornton's corruption. The community gathered, farmers and shopkeepers forming a protective ring around the property, their faces set with small-town defiance. Clara stood on the porch, one arm waiting in a sorry farm, her voice carrying as she addressed the cameras. "Richard Hale has spent months undermining Thornton Enterprises reforms," she said, holding up a stack of documents. "These show illegal payments to a shell company, designed to buy board votes and reverse our environmental work. He's threatened this farm, this community, to silence me. But we're not backing down." She gestured to the fields, the interns, the townsfolk. "This is what we're fighting for, a future where the land and its people come first." Ethan stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder, pride swelling in his chest. The cameras caught every word, every defiant glance. And when Hale's SUVs rolled up, they were met by a wall of reporters and sheriff's deputies. Hale himself stepped out, his face a mask of false concern. But the crowd's murmurs drowned his prepared speech. Clara handed the documents to Lisa Hayes, who promised a full investigation, and Hale's composure cracked, his eyes darting as he realized the tide had turned. By evening, Hale was gone, his allies distancing themselves as Thornton's board called an emergency meeting. Clara joined via video call, her voice steady as she presented the evidence. Securing her chairmanship and Hale's ouster, Ethan watched from the kitchen, Rusty at his feet, the journal opened to a new page. When Clara returned, her face was flushed with victory, but she sank into his arms, exhaustion finally winning. "We did it," she whispered, her breath warm against his chest. Ethan kissed her hair, his heart full. "You did it," he said, "and you're home." They stood there, the farm quiet around them, its fields a testament to their fight. Rusty whined softly, and Clara knelt to pet him, her eyes glistening. "Good boy," she said, and Ethan knew she was talking to more than the dog. Summer brought new life. The community center opened, its walls ringing with laughter as kids planted their first seeds. Clara now visibly pregnant, led workshops with Ethan. their hands often finding each other in the soil. Thornton Enterprises thrived under her leadership, its sustainability model spreading to other firms. But Clara spent more time at the farm, her New York trip shorter, her heart rooted here. One evening, as they sat on the swing, the journal filled with notes on crops, classes, wushworn, sirendirworn, and baby names, Clara turned to Ethan. I thought I'd lost myself 3 years ago. Ha, chonum, she said, her voice soft. But I found myself here, with you. Ethan pulled her close, the stars bright above. We found each other, he said, and as their unborn child kicked gently, he knew their legacy, love, truth, and a healed land would grow for generations. The summer sun hung low over the Caldwell Thornton farm, casting long shadows across the teaching gardens, where zinnias and sunflowers swayed in the warm breeze. Ethan knelt in the soil, his hands guiding a group of middle schoolers as they planted rows of late-season beans. Their chatter filled the air, a mix of excitement and curiosity. But Ethan's thoughts drifted to Clara, who was inside the farmhouse, preparing for a virtual board meeting with Thornton Enterprises. Her pregnancy was now in its final weeks, and though she radiated strength, Ethan saw the fatigue in her eyes, the weight of her dual roles as corporate leader and expectant mother. Rusty lay nearby, his gray muzzle resting on his paws, his breathing shallow. The old dog had rallied through the spring, but his strength was fading, each day a quiet gift. Ethan reached over to scratch his ears, his heart heavy with the knowledge that Rusty's time was near. The farm had changed so much. New barns, a bustling community center, fields that drew researchers from across the globe. But Rusty was a constant, a tether to the life Ethan had known before Clara, before the foundation, before the world had turned its eyes to their little corner of nowhere. Inside, Clara sat at the kitchen table, her laptop open, her voice steady as she addressed Thornton's board. The screen glowed with faces, some supportive, others skeptical, as she outlined the next phase of their sustainability initiative, a national network of farms modeled on their own, partnering with small-town communities to restore land and livelihoods. Her hand rested on her belly, a subtle anchor as she navigated corporate politics with the same precision she'd once used to shell beans on the porch. Ethan watched from the doorway, pride swelling in his chest. She was a force, Nama, Torniononum, his Clara, reshaping an empire while carrying their future. The meeting ended, and Clara closed the laptop, her shoulders slumping slightly. Ethan crossed the room, his hands gentle on her shoulders. You okay? He asked, his voice low. She leaned back into him, her head resting against his chest. Better now, she said, her voice soft but tired. The board's on board, mostly, but there's pushback from some of the old guard. They don't like change, especially when it comes from a pregnant woman in a farmhouse. Ethan's jaw tightened. They'll learn to deal with it. You're not backing down. Clara laughed, the sound bright despite her exhaustion. Not a chance, but I'm ready for a break. How's the garden crew doing? Ethan grinned, helping her to her feet. They're planting beans like pros. Want to see? Her eyes lit up, and she nodded, her hand finding his as they stepped outside. The kids swarmed Clara, their questions tumbling over each other. Why do beans need nitrogen? Can we plant pumpkins next? And she answered with patience, her corporate polish giving way to the teacher she'd become. Ethan watched, his heart full, but a flicker of movement on the ridge road caught his eye. A single black SUV, its engine idling, too familiar for comfort. His stomach twisted. Hale was gone, disgraced and powerless. But the world Clara had shaken still had its predators, and the farm was never far from their sights. He pulled Mike Larson aside, his voice low. See that car up there? Mike nodded, his face grim. Been there an hour. Same type as Hale's crew used. Ethan's mind raced. Clara's reforms had made enemies, rival CEOs, displaced board members, even local developers who'd hoped to buy the farm cheap. Keep the sheriff on speed dial, Ethan said, and tell Mrs. Larson to watch the kids. Mike clapped his shoulder. A silent promise. And Ethan returned to Clara, his face neutral to keep her from worrying. That night, they sat on the porch swing, the journal open between them, its pages now filled with plans for the farm network, baby names, and sketches of the community center's mural. Clara's hand rested on her belly, her face peaceful despite the long day. I felt her kick today, she said, her voice soft, strong, like her dad. Ethan's throat tightened, his hand covering hers. Or her mom, he said, kissing her temple. She's gonna take on the world, Clara smiled. But her eyes flicked to the ridge, where the SUV's headlights had vanished with dusk. You saw it too, she said, her voice quiet. Ethan nodded. No point in hiding it. Probably nothing, he said, but his tone lacked conviction. Clara's hand tightened on his. If it's something, we'll handle it. Like always a winner. Poirot. Her resolve steadied him, a reminder that they'd faced worse and come out stronger. The next morning, trouble arrived with the dawn. Ethan was checking the irrigation system when Mike's truck roared up, his face pale. Sheriff's at the gate, he said, breathless. Someone's filed a complaint, says the farm's violating environmental codes. They're demanding an inspection. Today, Ethan's blood ran cold. The farm's practices were impeccable, vetted by experts. But a surprise inspection could tie them up for weeks, draining resources and distracting Clara from her work. Clara met them at the porch, her face calm but her eyes sharp. It's a setup, she said, pulling out her phone. I'll bet my trust fund it's tied to that SUV. Someone's trying to slow us down. She dialed her legal team, her voice commanding as she demanded records of every complaint filed against the farm. Ethan watched, admiration mixing with worry. She was unstoppable, but the strain was taking its toll, her hand trembling slightly as she hung up. Sheriff Daniels arrived, his face apologetic. I don't like this any more than you do. Ethan, he said, holding a stack of papers. But the complaints from a state agency claims your runoff's contaminating the creek. Ethan's jaw clenched. The creek was cleaner than it had been in decades, thanks to their restoration work. It's nonsense, he said. Let them inspect. They won't find a thing. Clara stepped forward, her voice steady. They're welcome to look. Sheriff, but I want a third-party auditor here. And I want it on record that this complaint came out of nowhere. Someone's playing dirty, and I'm not letting them tarnish what we've built. Daniels nodded, respect in his eyes. I'll make the calls. You've got my word. The inspection was a circus. State officials swarmed the farm, their clipboards and stern faces a stark contrast to the kids' laughter in the garden. Clara moved among them, her pregnancy slowing her steps, but not her resolve. Answering questions with data and pointing to soil tests that proved their compliance. Ethan stayed close, his presence a quiet shield, while Mike and Mrs. Niwasu. Larson kept the community calm, serving coffee to reporters who'd caught wind of the drama. By midday, the auditors found nothing, no violations, no runoff, just a farm that set the standard for sustainability. The lead official, a wiry man with a pinched face, looked frustrated as he signed off on the report. This was a waste of time, he muttered. But Clara's smile was steel. Not for us, she said. Every test proves we're doing it right. Make sure that's in your report. As the officials left, Clara's legal team called with news. The complaint traced back to a consulting firm linked to a rival corporation, one that had lost contracts when Thornton went green. They're scared, Clara said, her voice grim but triumphant. We're changing the game, and they don't know how to stop us. Ethan pulled her close, his heart pounding. They can't, he said, not when you're fighting. That evening, the community gathered in the new center, its walls still smelling of fresh paint. Mrs. Larson had organized a potluck, tables groaning with casseroles and pies, a celebration of the farm's victory. Clara stood at the front, her voice carrying over the crowd. Today wasn't just about passing an inspection, she said, her hand on Ethan's arm. It was about proving that truth wins when we stand together. And this farm, this town, you're my strength. The room erupted in cheers, and Ethan felt tears prick his eyes, the weight of their shared fight lifting for a moment. But the peace was short-lived. 2 days later, as Ethan repaired a fence in the north field, Mike's truck screeched to a halt. It's Rusty, he said, his voice breaking. He's down by the creek. Can't get up. Ethan's heart stopped. He ran, his boots pounding the earth, until he found Rusty lying in the grass, his eyes cloudy but still warm. Clara was already there, her face streaked with tears, her hand stroking the old dog's fur. He was chasing a rabbit, she said, her voice trembling. He just stopped. Ethan knelt beside her, his throat tight as he touched Rusty's muzzle. The dog whined softly, his tail giving a weak thump. You're a good boy, Ethan whispered, his voice cracking. The best? Clara's hand found his, and they sat there, the creek gurgling nearby, as Rusty's breathing slowed, then stopped. his spirit slipping away under the wide summer sky. They buried him near the garden. Under a young oak Clara had planted in their first year, the community came, bringing flowers and stories, their grief a shared weight. Clara clung to Ethan, her sobs quiet but deep, and he held her, his own tears falling into her hair. "He brought us together," she said, her voice raw. That first day, in the woods, Ethan nodded, unable to speak, the memory of Rusty leading him to Clara as vivid as ever. The loss lingered, but life pressed on. Clara's due date approached, and the farm prepared for its newest arrival. The community center hosted a baby shower, its walls now adorned with murals of fields and rivers, painted by local kids. Clara laughed through tears as she opened gifts, tiny overalls, a quilt stitched by Mrs. Larson, a wooden rattle Ethan had carved, but her eyes kept drifting to the ridge, where no SUVs appeared, though the threat of retaliation hung like a storm cloud. One night, as they lay in bed, Clara's hand on her belly, she turned to Ethan. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "Not of the baby, but what if they come for us again? What if I can't protect her?" Ethan pulled her close, his heart steady despite his own fears. "We've faced worse," he said. "And we've got an army now, this town, this farm, you and me. She'll be safe." Clara's smile was small but real, and she kissed him, her warmth a promise against the dark. Their daughter, Lily, arrived on a golden September morning, her cries echoing through the farmhouse as Mrs. Larson, now a certified midwife, guided Clara through labor. Ethan held Clara's hand, his heart bursting as he saw their girl for the first time. Tiny, fierce, with Clara's dark eyes and a wisp of his sandy hair. The community celebrated, the center filled with song and stories. And even Edward Thornton flew in, his face softening as he held his granddaughter. Clara recovered quickly, her strength returning as she cradled Lily in the garden, teaching her the names of flowers before she could even babble. Ethan watched, his grief for Rusty easing in the light of new life. The farm thrived, its network expanding to 10 states, its methods studied by universities and corporations alike. Thornton Enterprises, under Clara's leadership, set new standards, its profits reinvested in communities like theirs. But the Ridge Road was never empty for long. A year after Lily's birth, as the farm prepared for its annual harvest festival, a new threat emerged. A lawsuit, filed by a shadowy conglomerate, claimed the farm's land was illegally zoned, threatening to halt operations. Clara's legal team traced it to a network of Hale's old allies, a last-ditch effort to undermine her legacy. She faced it with the same fire she'd shown in the barn, rallying the town, the press and Thornton's resources to fight back. The festival went on, a defiant celebration of their work. Clara spoke to the crowd, Lily on her hip, her voice ringing. "They think they can break us," she said, Ethan at her side. "But this farm, this family, this truth, it's stronger than their lies." The crowd roared, and Ethan kissed her, Lily giggling between them. As the sun set over fields that had grown more than crops, years later, the Caldwell Thornton farm stood as a beacon, its fields a patchwork of hope, its center a hub of learning and healing. Lily ran through the gardens, her laughter a new song, while Clara and Ethan, now graying but unbroken, watched from the swing. The journal, now a tome, held their story, wounds turned to wisdom, battles to victories, love to legacy. The ridge was quiet, the threats faded, but they never forgot. Truth was a harvest, hard-won and eternal, rooted in the soil they'd fought for together. Hey everyone, welcome back to the heart of the Caldwell Thornton farm, where truth grows as strong as our crops. I'm thrilled you're joining us for this incredible journey of love, mere resilience, and fighting for what's right. If Ethan and Clara's story has touched your soul, or if you're just loving the drama of small-town grit taking on corporate giants, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss a single chapter. Tomorrow, we've got something extra special lined up. So stick around and become part of our community. Let's keep growing this legacy together. Where are you tuning in from? Drop it in the comments below.